Imagine waking up on a quiet Sunday morning in a small California mountain community. The kind of place where people know each other, where the roads are quiet, the cabins are surrounded by trees, and nobody expects to hear anything more disturbing than a passing car. But on April 12, 1981, someone opened the door of Cabin 28 in Keddie, California, and discovered 3 people murdered inside. Glenna Sue Sharp was 36 years old. Her teenage son John was dead. So was John's 17-year-old friend, Dana Wingate. All 3 had been bound. All 3 had been attacked with multiple weapons. But there was something even more disturbing. Sue Sharp had another child, 12-year-old Tina Sharp, and Tina was gone. At first, investigators didn't even know exactly where she was. Her disappearance would become one of the strangest pieces of an already horrifying crime. 3 years later, Tina's remains would finally be found roughly 60 miles away. But by then, the killer had already disappeared into history, and the case would become buried under conflicting stories, questionable leads, missing opportunities, and suspects who died before they could ever face a courtroom. Then, decades later, investigators found something that changed the case: a hammer. It was discovered in a pond near Keddie, a hammer that reportedly matched the description of one a man living nearby had claimed was missing around the time of the murders. And then came another development. DNA recovered from a piece of medical tape at the crime scene was reported to match a living person. More than 40 years later, someone connected to this case may still be alive. So what really happened inside Cabin 28? Why were 3 people murdered while younger children were left alive in another room? Why was Tina taken from the cabin? And perhaps the most haunting question of all: how could 4 people be killed in a tiny mountain community with investigators having suspects, witnesses, physical evidence, and even later DNA, and still not have an answer? Tonight, we're going back to Keddie, not to repeat the rumors, not to turn suspects into villains without proof, but to follow the evidence and see how one of America's most disturbing unsolved murders became a mystery that refuses to stay buried. We Knox Files. And tonight, we're opening a case that still haunts investigators nearly 2 decades later. If you enjoy meticulously researched true crime documentaries that separate fact from fiction, consider subscribing. Every week, we uncover cases where the truth is often stranger than anything Hollywood could invent. April 11th, 1981. Keddie, California. A tiny community tucked into the Sierra Nevada mountains of Plumas County. At first glance, Keddie seemed like the kind of place where nothing truly terrible could happen. Cabins sat among the trees. Neighbors lived close together. Families came and went. And inside Cabin 28 lived Glenna Sue Sharp and her children. Sue was 36 years old. She had moved to California with her 5 children after separating from her husband. Life wasn't easy, but the family had built something resembling a home in Keddie. That Saturday night, April 11th, the cabin was busy. Sue was there. Her teenage son John was there. John's friend, 17-year-old Dana Wingate, was there, and several younger children were around the property as well. 14-year-old Sheila Sharp was spending the night next door with the Seabolt family. Her younger sister Tina, who was 12, was also at the neighboring cabin for part of the evening. Then, around 9:30 p.m., Tina returned to Cabin 28. At some point later that night, John and Dana also made their way back. And sometime during the night, everything changed. We don't know exactly when the attack began. We don't know exactly how the killers entered. And we don't know precisely what happened minute by minute. That's one of the reasons this case has remained so difficult. But we do know what investigators eventually found. 3 people were dead inside Cabin 28: Sue Sharp, John Sharp, and Dana Wingate. They had been bound and attacked with multiple weapons, and the violence was severe. The 3 younger boys in another bedroom survived. That detail is one of the most chilling parts of the entire case, because whoever attacked Cabin 28 did not simply destroy everyone inside. They left children alive, and one child was missing: Tina Sharp. The first person to discover the scene was Sheila. When she returned to the cabin the following morning, she found her mother, her brother, and Dana dead. She ran back to the Seabolt home. The family then returned toward cabin 28 and helped remove the surviving boys from the house. Police were called, and what investigators found inside that small cabin would become the beginning of a mystery that has lasted more than 4 decades. The victims had been restrained using materials including medical tape and electrical cord. Investigators also found weapons at the scene, including a hammer and knives. But there was something missing. There was no obvious explanation for why this family had been targeted. And there was no Tina. At some point, investigators realized the 12-year-old hadn't simply gone somewhere else. She was missing from a quadruple homicide scene. That changed the investigation. Now police weren't only searching for a murderer, they were searching for a missing child, and every hour mattered. The search for Tina would continue for years. Then, in 1984, human remains were discovered near Feather Falls in Butte County. Dental records eventually confirmed the remains belonged to Tina Sharp. She had been gone for approximately 3 years. But because of the condition of the remains, many questions surrounding her death could not be answered. Where had Tina been taken? Who had taken her? And why was she separated from the other victims? Those questions remain among the biggest mysteries in the entire case. And this is where the Keddie case becomes even more complicated. Because investigators did have people of interest. One of the names that repeatedly surfaced was Marty Smart, who lived nearby in cabin 26. Smart was married to Marilyn and lived with her children. Another man, Severin John Beau Boubed, was also staying with the Smart household around the time of the murders. Both men became important parts of the investigation. But here's where we have to be careful. Being considered a suspect or person of interest is not the same as being proven guilty. Neither Smart nor Boubede was ever convicted of the Keddie murders, and both men died without facing charges for the killings. Yet investigators would later uncover details that kept attention focused on that circle of people. One was a letter. After the murders, Smart wrote to his wife. The letter contained a disturbing sentence about having paid the price of her love and having bought it with 4 people's lives. Years later, investigator Mike Gamberg described the letter as extremely significant. But again, it was never a courtroom confession. It never produced a conviction, and it cannot, by itself, establish who committed the murders. That's the problem with Keddie. There are pieces. Some of them are deeply disturbing, but the pieces don't neatly form a complete picture. Then there was the strange story surrounding a missing hammer. Smart had reportedly said a claw hammer had disappeared from his home. Decades later, in 2016, investigators recovered a hammer from a pond near Keddie. The location was significant. It was close to the cabin, and the hammer reportedly matched the description of the missing weapon. Imagine that. 35 years after 3 people were found murdered and a 4th had disappeared, a possible murder weapon surfaces in a pond. But even that discovery didn't immediately solve the case. Finding an object isn't the same as proving who used it. Investigators needed forensic evidence. They needed a connection. They needed something that could survive scrutiny in court. And that brings us to one of the most important developments in the investigation: DNA. In 2018, Special Investigator Mike Gamberg said DNA had been recovered from a piece of white medical tape found near Sue Sharp's body. The tape was consistent with the type used to restrain the victims. According to Gamberg, the DNA profile matched a known living suspect. That was potentially enormous, because for decades, the case had suffered from a lack of identifiable biological evidence. Now investigators reportedly had a DNA connection to someone who was still alive. But there was another problem. The identity of that person was not publicly released, and no arrest followed. So the public was left staring at an invisible suspect, someone investigators knew about, someone they could potentially locate, someone whose DNA, according to the investigator, had been connected to evidence from the crime scene. Yet the case remained unsolved. And that leads to one of the most frustrating questions surrounding Keddie. Why? Why, after more than 40 years, has there still been no definitive answer? Part of the explanation lies in the original investigation. This was 1981. Modern DNA testing did not exist in the form investigators have today. Crime scene procedures were different. Technology was different. And according to later investigators, evidence and investigative opportunities were not always handled the way they might be today. Some evidence was apparently overlooked. Some leads were not fully pursued, and some potential witnesses gave conflicting accounts. Even the story of what happened inside Cabin 28 became tangled in speculation. There were rumors about drugs. There were rumors about organized crime. There were even later theories involving ritualistic motives, but investigators found no drugs or drug paraphernalia inside the Sharp home, and there was no established evidence that the murders were part of a satanic or ritualistic crime. That distinction matters, because when a case stays unsolved for decades, the empty spaces in the evidence tend to get filled with stories, and stories can become mistaken for facts. The truth is usually less satisfying. In Keddie, the truth is that we don't know exactly who walked into Cabin 28 that night. We don't know exactly why, and we don't know the complete sequence of events that ended with 4 people dead. What we do know is that the attack appears to have involved more than one weapon. We know 3 victims were restrained. We know Tina disappeared. We know her remains were found years later. We know investigators developed suspects, and we know evidence continued to surface decades after the crime. There's another disturbing question. How did the attackers manage to carry out such a violent crime without being stopped? Cabin 28 was not isolated in the wilderness. There were neighbors. There were other cabins, and at least one nearby resident later reported hearing what sounded like muffled screaming during the night. Yet by morning, 3 people were dead and Tina was gone. That silence became part of the mystery. So did the surviving children. They were in another bedroom while the killings happened. What did they hear? What did they see? And how much could a frightened child in 1981 realistically understand about something so horrific? One surviving boy, Justin Smart, later gave investigators accounts of the night. His statements became part of the investigation, including attempts to obtain information through hypnosis. But those statements have to be treated cautiously. Hypnotically refreshed memories are not the same thing as independent physical evidence. And in a case already crowded with uncertainty, memory is a dangerous place to build certainty. The investigation eventually produced sketches of 2 men based on descriptions. But those sketches did not lead investigators to a definitive answer, and the case slowly faded from national attention. The cabin remained a physical reminder for years. Eventually, Cabin 28 was demolished in 2004, but destroying the building didn't destroy the questions. They remained. Who killed Sue Sharp? Who killed John and Dana? Who took Tina? And did the people responsible act alone? Years later, Plumas County investigator Mike Gamberg returned to the case. He believed there was still evidence worth pursuing. The 2016 hammer was one example. The DNA was another. And according to later investigative statements, authorities believed there could have been several people involved either directly in the murders or in the subsequent cover-up. But again, those are investigative theories, not convictions, not facts proven in court. And that is exactly where the Keddie murders stand today. Unsolved. The official case has never produced a person convicted for the 4 deaths, but it hasn't simply disappeared either. Investigators have continued to examine old evidence. Technology that didn't exist in 1981 now allows biological material to be examined in ways investigators could never have imagined at the time. And that changes something important. Time has not necessarily destroyed every clue. Some clues may have simply been waiting for the technology to catch up. If you enjoy stories where the evidence matters more than the rumors, consider subscribing to the channel, because the most fascinating cold cases aren't always the ones with the biggest suspects. Sometimes they're the ones where one overlooked piece of evidence survives long enough to become useful decades later. And Keddie may still have pieces like that. The strangest part of this case isn't simply that 4 people were murdered. It's that someone appears to have known exactly what they were doing. They restrained the victims. They used multiple weapons. They left Tina alive long enough to be removed from the cabin. And somehow, whoever was responsible disappeared into a world that has now changed completely. The people who lived through that night grew old. Some suspects died. The original investigators aged. The cabin itself disappeared, but the case remained. And perhaps that is why Keddie continues to haunt people, because there is no satisfying ending, no courtroom, no confession that can be independently proven, no final explanation that answers every question. Just a family destroyed inside a small cabin in the California mountains, and a trail of evidence that seems to lead somewhere, only to disappear again. More than 40 years later, Tina Sharp still cannot tell us what happened to her. Sue Sharp cannot tell us who came through that door. John Sharp and Dana Wingate cannot tell us what they saw in their final moments. So we're left with the evidence, the tape, the weapons, the missing hammer, the letter, the DNA, the witnesses, and the unanswered question that has survived all of them. Who walked into cabin 28 that night, and why? Because somewhere between what investigators know and what they can prove, the truth is still hiding. And perhaps the most disturbing possibility is that someone who knows exactly what happened is still alive. If you were investigating the Keddie cabin murders today, what clue would you follow first? The DNA, the hammer, the people who were nearby that night, or Tina Sharp's disappearance? Tell me what you think happened inside cabin 28, because after more than 4 decades, the case is still waiting for its final chapter. I'm Knox Files. Every case leaves behind questions. Our job is to make sure they're never forgotten. Thanks for watching. Until next, stay curious and stay safe.